the increasing trend for me is a clear message that we need to think differently about how work appeals to young people. When I was 19, I started working full-time and haven't stopped since then, but it was very much a culture of going into the office. And so when I was 19, I was observing leaders above me.
You learned how to work.
I was learning how to work. I was learning the behaviors, how to deal with people, how to deal with conflict and difficult situations, how to present myself, how to accept and give feedback. So I think a lot of that informal learning has been lost, and I think young people are probably disadvantaged from that.
Struck recently by an interview I saw with Barack Obama, who said, someone was asking about advice for young people and what's the best advice to go take forward in your life, and he said, just be good at getting stuff done. That's simple. It's that simple. If you're young and you can get stuff done, you'll get more stuff to do, and then you'll get more stuff done, and you'll get more stuff to do, and I really love that.
And young people make much more values-based decisions.
Yes, very important point.
And they want to work. So, you know, a couple of my team have really questioned and gone further than this is a job, it will provide me with work and a salary. It's more than that. And I think that's across young people now that are looking to make sure that the value they bring to a role is more, it's in line with sustainable development.
Yes.
It's not adding to the problem that we have in terms of climate change and global warming.
I know from the Kainos team that they do actually offer a session, which is, what does Kainos do? How do we actually make money? What is our product? What is our services? Who are our customers? And that's fantastic, because it means straight off the bat, you're accelerating somebody's commerciality in your organisation. And actually, the thing I love about the Kainos training programme, which is quite unique, I think, is it's sort of like a good 12-week programme for their apprentices, which is a huge upfront investment.
Yes.
We're here talking today about skills and training and what companies can be doing. And I think, I think there's sometimes I guess maybe an attitude that says, well, it's quite costly to do this. But what Kainos kind of experienced and developed over time was that actually it wasn't enough to give, for example, school leavers coming into their workforce the same type of training or onboarding experience that maybe those who are a wee bit older were getting. And actually, even though when they did that cost-benefit analysis, they said, yes, it's an upfront cost for us to take people out of the business for a significant amount of time, but that like classroom-based environment where they're given a sort of deep dive into the great and the good of what it means to work at somewhere like Kainos actually meant that when they went back into the workplace and they kind of joined their various business units, they were able to run at pace much, much faster than they would have otherwise.
What I see is a group of young people who are actually concerned about the planet, concerned about the world, concerned about the macroclimate, likely to have multiple jobs, likely to be really intent on doing purposeful things in their work.
British education is second to none in the world in lots of different ways, but we are not bringing the world of work into our schools, into our education settings. So we have a great shortage of careers advice capacity in most schools. We probably have, I would say, a lack of systemic engagement between workplaces and educational settings.
An understanding between employers and the education system on what those skills are, when they're going to be needed, and make sure that the job opportunities that employers are creating are aligned with the training provision and the careers advice and education that young people are getting, so that people are moving into those jobs seamlessly, really, and employers don't have these skills shortages.
And there's a whole other area that was really uncovered, which is actually more about the softer side of work readiness, getting young people just ready.
That's come up a few times. What do you
go into business, factory, office, whatever it may be, and the sort of confidence, communication, critical thinking type skills that are there. They're there in those young people. They just need to be a bit brought out.
Yes, and I feel very lucky that I was given quite specific tasks and actions around that when I first started working, but that is not the case for many people, is it? And you have to, as an employer, spend time and investment, and it might not always be a priority to do those things.
Welcome back. Let's get into part 2. Hope you're feeling refreshed. So this panel discussion is going to explore the hybrid working conundrum. Hybrid working has been accelerated since COVID. In 2019, pre-pandemic, 4.7% of jobs will work from home. By 2020, the ONS shared that 46.6% of employees were doing at least part of their job from home. And by 2022, a quarter of UK employees work from home some of the time and 13% all of the time. While not available for all roles, there are many advantages to hybrid working. However, young people may miss out on learning from more experienced colleagues, informal mentoring, and learning from their peers as well. So to explore this topic further, I'm joined by our expert panelists to share their insights and thoughts. I'm joined by Viren, John, Kath, and Chris. I wondered if we could just go down the line and just say a bit more about what you do before we get into the panel discussion. Maybe we can start with you, Viren.
Sure. I'm Viren Patel. I work at the AU. I'm the Director of Employers and Partnerships. And my role is focused around the skills-based landscape around all 4 nations of the UK and international.
Thank you.
So hi, I'm John Griffin. I'm part of the management team responsible for early professionals at IBM, of which we have about 700 to 800, and I'm currently responsible for the learning and development for those early professionals.
Hi, I'm Kath Austin. I'm the Chief Programme Officer at Form the Future, and we're one of those organisations that sits between students and the world of work, and we work with students to increase their confidence and show them the variety of work that they can do, and we work with businesses as well to encourage them back into schools and to bring students out into their workplaces.
Hi, I'm Chris Luck. I'm the CEO of the Shaw Trust Group, which is an employability charity, but using a child-to-career framework. And what we try to do is help those with life challenges, hurdles, impediments to good work to overcome those and then go into work and then progress within work. And when I say large scale, last year I think we helped about 300,000 people, so it is quite a large scale. So.
Amazing, thank you. Kath, I'm going to start with you. So what are young people's needs and expectations around hybrid working? And do they actually want the opportunity to come into the office?
The second question, I think there is a resounding yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of research to show that, lots of surveys been done. But I think if we look at it from the young people's perspective, take an empathic approach to that, their context, their view of what they're moving into next is quite limited. Mm-hmm. And so they're sponges and they're coming into this position where they're like, right, I need to learn everything. I need to just have my eyes open and be taking in all the information. And the moment you go into a remote working situation, you cap the ability to take on new information and just learn about that working world. And so they do, I think I struggle with it. I struggle working remotely to understand because non-verbal communication isn't happening readily. And also, young people are asking more from their working environment because of this blending between your home life and your work life. Yes. And so with that, they're asking for more community at work and they're asking for better well-being. And I think that when you have a remote working situation, it's harder to build a community.
Yes.
And so those are big challenges that they face, and it does hamper development through their work.
What are some of the wins, though, with the hybrid working? Because for the young people I speak to, a lot of them say they do want the online experience.
Yes.
A lot of them are quite scared. Even though it's good to challenge them by putting them in the office environment, a lot of them say that actually the online way is the easiest way in to get into work.
There's 2 ways of looking at this, I think, initially. I think that they are used to working online in life. Yes. This is a tool they're very comfortable with. It can be a bit of a comfort zone as well, and so they're probably likely to say, oh yeah, I'll work from home, that sounds great. And I see that myself, and it's quite hard sometimes to get up and drag yourself into an office.
Yep.
But the benefit of when you go in is huge. It's huge. I've actually forgotten the other point.
No, just like what are the benefits for them?
Benefits, yes. So I'm a mother, I'm a working mother, and so benefits for me being able to stay at home or work remotely when I've got extra pressures from being a mother, awesome. I think when you're younger, you may not have the need to be there for somebody else, maybe you do. But I think as you move through work, that ability to work flexibly becomes even more important. And maybe when you're young, you can use that to your advantage. Maybe you've got more, no commute time, so you've got more time for your own pursuits outside of work.
Yes. John, I'm coming to you next. You're working with a multi-site business with employees based around the country. So I guess you've got experience within this space. What's that like?
Yeah, so what I would say first of all is IBM has been a hybrid workforce for 20 plus years. So I haven't actually had an office or a desk to go to for over 20 years. So it's been quite the norm. Because we're a technology company, we've got some of those tools that facilitate that. But from our perspective, we've got about 4 or 5 main locations. So from Manchester, Warwick, London, Winchester in Hampshire, and Portsmouth are our main locations. But we hire early professionals from anywhere and everywhere in the country. And we will attach them to one of those locations as their kind of base location. What I would say is early young talent absolutely demand and expect the opportunity for hybrid work. It's an expectation coming into the workforce. My observations are those cohorts that joined during lockdown are probably finding it harder to then come back out of that and come in and be more present in the office. Because they were inducted as part of lockdown, they started their training and their program and their work experience, work life in remotely. They found it a little bit hard, and there's many reasons for that, whether it be time of travel, cost of travel, anxiety, a number of reasons for that. As we've come out of that and we've gone back to a face-to-face kind of induction and the first parts of their learning being face-to-face predominantly, we're seeing those now being more comfortable with coming to the office. And my observations are also that those that are more present in the workplace, not every day, it's still hybrid, it could be 2 or 3 days a week, but those that are more present, I'm observing they are probably developing faster than those that are more reticent to come into the office and get involved in things. We've actually got some initiatives we're doing. There's something happening this week, actually. So for Tuesday to Thursday, something called Get In. So get into the workplace, get inspired, get involved, where we're running 3 days of education workshops, things like navigating feedback, building positive habits. We're putting on some social and some networking things as well, because we realise we've got to give them a reason and a purpose to come into the office. What's the blockers and what's the barriers to that? And it's our jobs to really facilitate things for them to come into the office, for those especially that are a little bit hesitant, I would say, because we realise that whole learning by osmosis, coming in, shadowing, observing, is where people develop the most.
I love that. I wanted to talk about some of the expectations that people do have around flexibility. I mean, I've been working from home since 2017 now. My role at the BBC as LGBT correspondent was entirely home-based, plus wherever I needed to film. I just grabbed my kit, grabbed my producer, and we went to wherever we needed to go. I've never had a physical desk within an office space. And I think, to be honest, if I was to be given an offer for a role within journalism, and I was told I need to be sat at a desk for 5 days a week, it probably hindered the work that I actually do. It's easier to be mobile and just be everywhere that I need to be. So what have people's expectations been like around flexibility, and how has that changed since COVID?
Yeah, so I think it's probably increased in terms of the expectation to have time not in the office and time at home. I think that I agree that actually the thought of going into an office every day and sitting at the same desk every day horrifies me.
Can't imagine it.
I just couldn't do it. So actually having the variety, I think, is good just for your general health and well-being, different changes of environment, but also depending on what you need to do. So again, I think most people have more productive days at home, actually, in terms of getting stuff done.
Yeah.
You get more stuff done if you're at home without those interruptions and maybe a longer day. I think you need to accept and be prepared. If you're going to go into the office, you're going to have those ad hoc conversations, meetings, collaboration and opportunities, which are all good as well, but we've got to find reasons for those to happen and for people to go in. And I find when I do go into the office, I went into the office a couple of weeks ago, didn't open my laptop. So there's lots of stuff backing up emails, and oh no, I've got to catch up. But actually, I was so energized by that day because I was just meeting people on the stairs, in the corridors, having really meaningful conversations. So actually the benefit of that day was probably it was just as much as sitting at home and just doing emails and doing work all day at home. So you've got to find the balance, and when are the right times to go in.
Yes. Chris, I'm coming to you next. So the Shaw Trust aims to help people find and keep meaningful jobs and helps younger people navigate key turning points in their lives. How did that mission evolve and during and after COVID?
Because the majority of the people that we wish to help or choose to help are those that have complex needs and life challenges, whether through social, socio-economic background or geographies or well-being. What we found actually was kind of counterintuitive, that during COVID, particularly those young individuals that we helped, who had a natural disinclination to get to centres in order to be, if you like, preached at in the old model of doing things. We found that actually the remote working gave them a lot more confidence and a lot more willingness to engage with the soft skills preparations in particular, in being able to cope with understanding what's being put to them because they're in their safe environment, they're in their home environment or in an environment where they are used to. So what we found is actually the success rate in the programs we were running on behalf of DWP and others actually increased massively. And we reported this to DWP as we were coming out of COVID to say that actually our approach of more remote and less in presence created a significant, and I'm using that in the true sense of academic, a significant variance to say there were better outcomes and that we wanted to maintain them. But of course, COVID was over, so we went back to the old contract where we had to start dragging people back in again. And we saw that the youth in particular, their confidence and their success started to drop off again. So in that sense, counterintuitive is what we found.
Wow. Viren, I'm coming to you. The OU is a Four Nations university. How did it work during COVID, and what are the current ways of working at the OU?
Okay, so the OU is a Four Nations university. We have colleagues in all Four Nations, so we've kind of already had a culture of remote learning, collaboration, really. But what I think COVID did was actually level the playing field.
Okay.
So in the past, when colleagues were remote and people were in the office, they felt slightly isolated and detached from that conversation. COVID, everyone was remote, so therefore they were part of that conversation, and it was a level playing field. So I think that's the one thing from a kind of a university point of view. But from my team, I kind of have a phrase. The phrase is location with a purpose. And what does that mean? Well, actually, if you've got a lot of data to crunch or you've got a report to write, being at home is actually maybe the best place for you because you actually can concentrate on the work. You can have no sort of outside pressures and outside noise affecting you. But you can also come into the office when you want to collaborate, when you have team meetings. So we do have regular team meetings. They all meet up and they come into the office on a couple of days a week. I have my all-hands meetings where I bring everyone in my unit together to talk about what's going on and to collaborate. So it's trying to find that balance, I reckon, and that's the important thing. I think also as a training provider, we are a distance education provider. So actually, we were ideally placed to deal with the challenge of COVID and being remote. So I think for us, we saw an increase in the demand for our services from existing students, but also potentially new students. And not only that, we are actually supporting other institutions and other organisations to actually go online. So in instance, we were benefiting from COVID in terms of being remote, but actually we're helping other partners around the UK to actually go online, with our approach. So it kind of helped in that way.
That makes sense. Catherine, coming back to you, what are you seeing across different sectors and how is that impacting young people in particular?
So different sectors, the stats suggest that half of everybody in the workforce are working at least in some way remotely, but of course that's very different in different sectors. So the service industry, it's almost impossible to do that.
Yes.
And so for young people to be able to move into that sector, for example, is so much easier in some sense because first of all they can see it's in their life. Just as a child growing up, they can see that sector. They can get. I know that casual work is diminishing, but it's certainly not in that sector. And so there's ease of experience gained. Sectors where we've got a high proportion of the staff working remotely or in a hybrid situation, I find are often invisible to the general public. It's not widely advertised and not widely known. And so the experience of being able to understand what it's like to work when you're in school still, so the traditional work experience model is year 10, that's not necessarily available anymore because there's nowhere for them to go. There's no office that's regularly populated with the workforce. There might be one or two people kind of sporadically placed around this chasmic office, but there isn't the same buzz anymore.
No.
And that's going to and is affecting young people's ability to fully understand the possibilities before them. That already careers are misunderstood because there's no context, but also there's no messaging about it in school, and they don't even have the chance to go and have a look for themselves. So there needs to be, hybrid is something which is going to carry on. By the looks of it, everybody quite favours this way of working, and so we need to find a way, as a solution, that we can involve students, and there is a model where perhaps people do come in and there is an opportunity for young people to experience life in the office, but also experience it at home. That brings all sorts of issues up, like safeguarding.
Yeah.
But it should be part of, and I love what Lynn was saying about tearing up work experience as it stands now and reinventing it, bearing in mind the hybrid working model, because it needs to be addressed, it needs to be embedded, and we need to have more investment from businesses from the higher level to say, yes, we're on board, and we're going to go in and we're going to take part and invest in it.
Keeping on that thought, so I've got to hear that you believe that the lack of face-to-face opportunities for young people has had a knock-on effect on talent pipelines. Can you tell me more about that?
Okay, so you can, work experience year 10, everybody knows it's been going decades and decades. But actually, I think it was Lauren who mentioned that limiting beliefs, it might have actually been somebody else who mentioned limiting beliefs start to set in really, really early on. And so if we don't start, I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah. So the lack of face-to-face opportunities for young people is having a knock-on effect on talent pipelines.
That's right, yeah. So if we don't start talking with students in year 10 and opening the doors for them, then they're not going to... Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm really struggling to talk. The knock-on effect of this. Is there any?
I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
No, it's all good. We've got some water. Thank you. Chris, I'm going to come to you. So you also help businesses become better workplaces. Has this area of work become more challenging due to hybrid and remote working?
That's a great question, Ben. And I can approach this in two ways. One is by helping others, but also we are a large employer ourselves. We have over 3,000 staff, and we have a very high churn rate because we run effectively a contract portfolio system. So we have contracts coming online and offline all the time. So managing a workforce is as much a challenge for me as it is for helping others. And it reminds me that when COVID lockdown first started, I had this rather bizarre existentialist moment when in my inbox at one time, I had an email from one of my employees saying that if I made them go into the office, they would sue me. I had another email that said, if I don't allow them to go into the office, they would sue me. So, the bell curve rules, and that is something that we really need to be conscious of. There isn't a right and wrong answer. And the reality is there is a concentration of demand, which I see is sitting around the hybrid space, but there is also the extremes, which also organizations have to address. The other thing that I just want to say, that in our observation, the evolving world of work is impacting all age groups. And the other age group that is particularly impacted, as well as youth, is also the over 50s. I mean, they are in an extraordinary place of challenge, and they too are exiting the workplace because they don't believe there is a world of work for them. So in our thinking, it's actually, again, the two extremes that need to be addressed, because in this country, we can't afford to have children in NEET or youth in NEET, and we can't afford to have competent, experienced, qualified people believing there is no place for them. So that is something that we need to address. For the youth themselves, my observation is that they have a preference for distributed, dispersed differentiated work as a norm. They don't like doing the same thing day in, day out. They don't like coming into the office day in, day out. They like to know they can come into the office when they want at a point of choice, which then is quite difficult to manage. The other observation that we had, that in trying to address the bell curve, we've seen a huge increase in diversity in our own workforce. And diversity in every sense. And you mentioned that, you know, working from home is advantageous because of children and caregiving. Well, we've seen a huge increase in diversity because people can now access work because of hybrid. And this plays through into our work streams that we deliver as well. And the other bit about diversity, it means we've got a much higher geographical diversity because people can now work with us and live in what are, you know, considered to be remote places to where our efforts are: London, Birmingham, and the Midlands predominantly. So we've got people working for us living in Scotland and Wales and the Southwest, and that gives us diversity in every sense. But the other challenge that we have organisationally in making sure that the hybrid model is about right is that sometimes you've got to make hard choices. So we have the largest not-for-profit children's home business in the country. I haven't yet worked out how to deliver children's care in homes remotely or even hybridly. Yeah. So then across the work spectrum, you've got the challenge between those that want some remote and hybrid but can't, and then others that want it but can't because the nature of commission contracts say, no, this is hybrid or remote. So we are learning from our own experience and practice and development and trying to help organisations, whether it's with disability confidence, whether it's with diversity, and also particularly helping organisations manage and enable youth in particular because of the high levels and increasing levels of mental health issues, helping organisations to create handrails for those with mental health challenges, which can be, as you know, expressed in many, many different ways. And also the rise in neurodiversity and the expectation that you must address neurodiversity. You can't just say it's odd and put it aside. So we're sort of seeing all of that play out, and it all needs to be addressed by this community as to how do you bring that all together.
Yikes. Yes, a lot of work to do. Could you actually tell me a bit more about the over 50s challenges? It would be really interesting to know more.
And I can say this as an over 50.
Let's go.
So what the over 50s, the over 50s, and again I am sort of caricaturing this. It's obviously a bell curve within the over 50s as well. Is what they're seeing is that the pace of work evolving away from, let's call it traditional blue or near blue work, is changing so quickly. That their skill sets and their experience are now also equally not passing the interview hurdle. In fact, they're not even getting to interview. So they can't even say they've got this experience. They too suffer from an inability to take their work experience to date and to put it and to express it in terms that are readily digestible and understandable by employers. So employers can see opportunity rather than risk. A bit like youth. They see risk first, not opportunity. So there's a mindset piece there that needs to be played out. And also, I think, the rate of change is so rapid that there is a sense of alienation from the workplace. If you said to a 55, 58, 60-year-old, don't worry, I think you'd make a very fine drone pilot. They sort of not really know what you're talking about. Or you could be, an avatar assistant. They haven't got a clue what you're talking about. So we have another left behind generation, but it's at the other end of the spectrum. Yeah. And our youth today will be our 50s. So, and the conversations I've had with Open University, we have to have a culture and an embrace culture of through life education, skilling, upskilling, new skilling, reskilling at a rate of change that actually our education system doesn't support, our government doesn't support in its incentives to business to actually upskill, new skill, reskill at pace.
Yes.
So there are systemic level problems that ultimately filter down into massive hurdles for youth and massive hurdles for the other end. And those of us that are sort of in between the two are I'm guessing, we're the new golden age. You know, we're the new golden age at the moment, a bit like they talk about the baby boomers being, well, we're the new ones at the moment. And someday somebody's going to point out that that is unfair. Wow. There's much work to be done.
Really interesting, thank you. Viren, I'm coming to you next. The OU is a major provider for apprenticeships and other forms of learning. Why is it important that L&D continues in the hybrid environment?
So I think COVID was a major disruptor to education of young people nowadays, and we've got lots of evidence that young people have been negatively impacted by the lack of face-to-face of education. So for me, learning at work is essential, right? It's the bridge between sort of education and the workplace. And being able to build that bridge through the challenges they face is really essential for organizations to do that. Yep. And learning needs to be accessible, it needs to be flexible. It can't be around around geographic boundaries anymore. It's got to be able to flex with the way people are working and young people are working. So I think that's really important. So it's got to overcome those barriers. And I think, we heard from Joseph this morning around how apprenticeships kick-started his career. Well, actually, they're the perfect way for young people to launch their careers at work. They continue to learn in a structured way. They're working, they're learning from the employers, getting all that input in to actually apply that to their education, to their workplace. So that's really important. And I think more and more people, so employers, government, learning providers, parents, individual students or employees, are seeing the benefit of learning on the job. And I think that's really important. And we've got a brilliant example of an employer that works with their employees in that way. So RDT Limited, who's going to be on the panel later on today, are a great example of how they are using apprenticeships to bridge that gap, to make it more accessible for young people to actually learn and earn at the same time.
Amazing. Catherine, coming to you next. So outside of formal learning, what do young people need to thrive in the workplace?
Thank you for forgiving me for the lack of being able to speak. Thriving in the workplace is something which is continual. The learning to be able to do that is continual. And as I alluded to in my previous question, it starts early, so laying the foundations of understanding what it is that I need to be able to do to be able to move into these roles, and then to move on to my next role and my next role. And I think one of the major things that we can be doing to encourage young people to thrive in the workplace is blending and not making this divide between education and work. So young people are moving and making that entire huge leap, and we're expecting them to make that leap and come out of an institution where they have to ask permission to go to the toilet.
Yeah, it's real.
Into an institution where we're expecting them just to know how to act.
Yes.
And so I would say that businesses need to take more responsibility, it's quite an ask, and use organisations, shameless plug, like Form the Future, to be able to work more in schools.
Yes.
To talk with students about what it's actually like day to day, and what they do is perhaps they have a team meeting, and how do you talk in that team meeting? What are those listening skills? How do you work together? How do you bring the skill set that you innately have, and then what's that contribution? And so we start doing that really early on with primary school students. We brought 150 into Illumina at Granta Park in Cambridge, and they got to understand what it was like to be a scientist. And that was really eye-opening for them. It starts to lay down the foundations and that social capital. And we can do that at every stage. And when it doesn't happen, the leap into work is too enormous.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, sorry, it's
no, go for
a long
it.
question, thriving in the workplace, ultimately, we're humans, we work very, very well with other humans. There needs to be more mentorship, there needs to be more near-peer modelling within the system, and that, I would say, doesn't just stop in your early career, it should carry on all the way through. And so when a young person comes into a role, they're far more likely to succeed if someone who's only a few steps ahead of them can show them how they got there, what they did, how they failed, how they got up and started again. Yeah. Rather than someone who's 20 years ahead and has really succeeded and everything's gone really well for them. It hasn't. And so if we build in the system of mentorship, and role models within work, I think we're going to see a lot more success. And that does lend itself to a hybrid working model in lots of ways.
Yes. I wondered if you've got any thoughts on why it is that this generation is struggling and my generation, your generation, just didn't in the same way. I got challenged with this in a recent funding application I did for my organisation, and it was difficult because I genuinely just didn't really know. Is it that we just have the internet now, so we speak to other people about their struggles and we can combine and like compare our experiences in work experience and see whether what we're going through is normal? Why is it that people are struggling now and they didn't previously?
I think it's a major shift that our generation, I love that you said our generation.
Love it.
These generations have grown alongside the digital world. It's like a whole other universe online. My daughter's 11. She's never known a world without the internet.
Yeah.
She doesn't understand that I sat in the hallway on a telephone hoping my mum didn't have the phone listening in to the other side. And they don't necessarily, they're not born with the tools to know how to navigate that world.
Yeah.
And I think it can be quite isolating. And then we have COVID.
Yeah.
And immediately you've got everybody being told just to stay within this little circle of people in their household and not start to stretch out, build confidence, build skill sets, build context. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost a perfect storm that this small span of maybe 10 years within that generation, from maybe my daughter's age up to where they're leaving school now, they've really missed out. And I think we're all affected, but someone said it earlier, that this formative stage in their life is where they start to do things like build friendship groups, understand those dynamics which are so important, get their first boyfriend or girlfriend, have a Saturday job, and all of that was missed.
Yeah.
It's my opinion. I think perhaps that's got something to do with it, but we probably do need to do more research and understand what it is exactly that what the problem is, so that we can address it more directly.
Yes. John, I'm coming to you. So IBM has a ladder of opportunity. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, so our ladder of opportunity is basically the availability of opportunities to progress. So we have apprenticeships from level 3 to level 7 that we offer for our employees. And really it's giving people, we don't see, or we don't expect people to necessarily come in, complete an apprenticeship, and then that's the end of your learning and development and off you go, good luck. We're really keen to see people, look at what other opportunities are available. So we're quite proud of the fact that we've seen some people sort of go through that journey, that ladder of opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I manage an apprentice at the moment who came in, completed a level 4 apprenticeship, successfully completed that with distinction. They've since just on the verge of completing a level 6 degree apprenticeship, and we're having conversations about level 7.
Wow.
And they're on the verge of getting their 3rd promotion. They've just bought their 2nd property.
Come on.
They're 24. 6 years ago, they were the people coming out of college. And again, we've talked about the kind of skills and having skills. And again, it might be semantics. We were talking about this before, but I think it's more around the behaviours. So again, it's identifying the behaviours that people have, which then facilitate them building those skills. It's our job to give them the skills. But when I talk about behaviours, I'm talking about having a growth mindset, being resourceful, a bit of resilience, a bit of creativity and problem solving. If they've got those, which is what we look at in our exploration sessions, we don't call them assessment centres, we call them exploration, so we remove the assessment piece. That's what we identify, and then that looks for the opportunity to then go on that ladder of opportunity. Really important for us in our sector because digital skills are changing all of the time. So again, we can look at what those opportunities, those qualification and learning opportunities are in the digital space, relevant to our strategy and our organisation, and where we need our employees to be kind of building along that ladder of opportunity. So it's been a great success for us.
Can I ask, how competitive are those exploration centres?
Competitive in terms of getting through. Yeah. So we have a lot of demand. We have a lot of interest in our apprenticeships. So when we opened our degree apprenticeships as part of Apprenticeship Week in February, we opened it in the morning, it closed at lunchtime.
Wow.
Because we were so oversubscribed, literally thousands of applicants. So we have to close it at that point. The actual, once you're in, and interesting, we talked about AI and the use of that in recruitment. Now we are a technology company, 113 years old. AI, Gen AI, and hybrid cloud is our strategy. Surprisingly, we're not really using AI in our recruitment. It's pretty much a manual. Very much a manual process. You'll be surprised at how little we're using AI in our recruitment process, actually. But we go through the application form, kind of a pre-online test, and then we have an exploration session, which is kind of a couple of group activities, and then a one-to-one conversation interview. Now, we don't set any quotas on, so if we've got an exploration session with 18 people in it, we can take all 18.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not a competitive environment in that we can only take 5 of you.
Yes.
We're just looking at getting people through to that next stage, which then we match them to the relevant roles in the business at that stage. So I'm always very clear to say you're not competing against one another today, because that's a bit of that can trip them up.
Yeah.
And then we see some of those not so positive behaviours. So I'm always very clear, we're very transparent in terms of that communication. And actually prior to that, things that have been discussed today, we have a pre-call, we set them up as a social group as well, so they know what to expect in terms of coming out. So we make it as easy for me to say, but as comfortable as possible coming into that session.
No, I love that, because I was just thinking when I first did assessment centres was after university, so it was like 4 internships, but it's 4 graduate schemes, so it would have been more like 2021.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine doing that level of high pressure environment, knowing you're walking into something with people you have to be nice to, but at the same time you're competing with them. You literally want to beat them in every way possible to get the job. And I was thinking, how would I have managed that at like 16, 17 years? I don't think I could have. Like, it's tough. It's tough. Chris, I'm going to come to you next. How does the Shaw Trust support education and help bridge the jump into the work environment, please?
That's a great question. I just want to just comment on what John just said, which first of all, your programs are excellent and they are, highly sought after. But just a general comment is that, absent soft skills and traumatic personal hinterlands, physical, mental, and metaphysical, closes down access to a significant percentage of those that might aspire to the sorts of opportunities that John has. So it is actually quite a narrow choke point to that place. So these individuals, as already commented on, what they do is they safely self-select out through de-aspiring. So actually what we need to do is how do you create an equity in the aspirational space? Aspiration is something that is too often missed out on as a sort of a motivating factor, so that John is doubly, trebly overwhelmed with applicants for those programs from those hinterlands which are effectively disincentivized and disadvantaged. So that's the thing. Now, back to your question, Ben. So we absolutely believe that education, learning, skills is a critical pathway on the child to career pathway. So we have our own multi-academy trust, the Shaw Education Trust, which we sponsored, started with 2 schools, it's now 35 schools, it's fully grown up and it's doing amazing things, deliberately set up in an area of socioeconomic deprivation. 10,000 students, 5,000 of them are on the school meals scheme. That is part of our using education. We've just worked with the Department for Education to get them to change their policy so we could set up a single academy trust, set up a school for children that are in our children's home in one particular area, because there was no, so although the children were in-countied, whereas before they were scattered around the country, in-county, the right thing to do, there was no schooling for them. So the DfE, working together with the county council, we changed the policies to set up, at risk to all, a single academy trust to give those children an opportunity and equity for the future. So that's another way we do it. And then, of course, for businesses, critical that they offer education, learning, and reskilling opportunities for their workforce. So as our normal sort of competencies into the programs we develop and offer, we have an education, learning, and skills division. So education, learning, and skills is critical now and forevermore.
Thank you. Friend, I'm coming to you. How important is flexibility in learning when offered to young people?
I think it's hugely important. I think young people have grown up in this digital world. So I call them the YouTube or TikTok generation. And I know my 24-year-old son has not watched you on BBC.
That's it.
He learns everything from YouTube, right? Yeah. That's his go-to. So I think, having flexibility in your learning to be able to fit in other things that young people want to do, like doing part-time or full-time work, like caring for friends or relatives, enjoying life, or actually having a side hustle, which is a more common thing, is really important. And we kind of have a great example of working with an employer to do this. So we work with Uber Eats and Uber Drive. They give access to their drivers and their couriers short courses from the OU to a point actually to get to a degree as well, so they can have a degree. Not only for them as a driver, but actually for their family. So it's a learning as a benefit. So they've seen this importance of flexibility. They've seen this as a way of keeping loyal staff engaged, but also it's not, face-to-face learning is not fitting with the modern occupations now. Yeah. So having that flexibility is really important. I think that's really, really good to see and to hear as well. And I think, we've got some recent surveys we've conducted where 48% of the young people that we've surveyed said that actually flexibility was key, and that the OU does offer that flexibility as well as other organisations. So it's really important that we're able to deliver that flexibility in that workplace.
Yes, thank you. John, can you tell us about the IBM and OU collaboration in the apprenticeship space, please?
Yeah, I think it leads on from what Varun said there, flexibility being a key word, actually. So for us, we have a very good relationship with the Open University. We're able to offer apprenticeships with the OU for, sometimes, again, coming back to that ladder of opportunities, some of those may be mid-career professionals that perhaps are doing it later on in their career, and it might just work better for them in terms of having the remote nature of that, and they tend to be a little bit more disciplined in terms of kind of completing the work. But we're also seeing some of our new joiners from college, having that opportunity as well. OU are able to offer us the apprenticeships that fit our workforce strategy, very easy to work with, good relationships, and actually Open University show curiosity in terms of what we're doing as a business and are in tune with that. So I think there's many reasons for that, but again, I think it comes back to the flexibility for us as an organisation, but then for us as learners. So one of our learners that changed providers actually towards the Open University talked about when they were making that decision, they were kind of moving house to a different part of the country. Okay. So actually it's very hard for them to then say, okay, I'm going to choose this university because based on location, whereas the OU really worked very well for them at that time, as well as the quality teaching and coaching and mentorship that they receive as well.
Amazing. We might have some time for questions in the room / online. I think we're probably going to, I think we will. We'll get the mic to you in just 1 second. In the meantime, Chris, I'm going to come back to you. What are your views on the role of internships, coaching and mentoring in the new hybrid environment?
I'm glad you asked me this, because I think this is one of the critical change areas that society and organisations and business really need to get their heads around. So in my own time, pre-COVID, because of my own previous experience, but also going into COVID subsequently, we have to change how we deliver that. So I now spend approximately 40% of my time mentoring, coaching, prompting, identifying talent within my own organisation. I have spent and invested in Future Leaders programs, Future Leaders Foundation programs, shadow executive boards, coffee with the CEO, drop-ins, all of it to invest in our people so they have those touch points. So the next thing, of course, is that the senior leadership must change and believe in that and embrace it if it is to work. So it's fundamental, mentoring, coaching, and creating that new way of learning from the office. Yeah. The office has to come to the hybrid world. I think what it means is that we need better distributed leadership. It needs to be geographically unanchored. The come to the office or you won't develop is 19th century. It's just unacceptable, and it's not a default we should be defaulting back to. I think leaders need to be brave enough to evolve accordingly, and you have to embrace risk, and you have to take risk and embrace risk if youth are to develop in a reduced oversight environment, which is what hybrid working is. But the flip side of reduced oversight and risk and appetite for it is that it's a creativity and experimental catalyst for youth. Because guess what? They need to get on with it, and they need touch points and guidance. And that touch, and then suddenly they start to do amazing things. I mean, I'll give one example. I'm sorry about that. One example. You know, we were at one stage about 2 years ago. We were struggling with rebranding the corporate image because the organisation said they wanted it, and we went externally, and expensive organisations were not giving me what my people wanted. And we had this youngster, and he was a youngster, who I thought was so talented. So one day I just messaged him, just say, is there any chance that you can just give me a complete redesign for the organisation? Came back, yes, of course, Chris. Okay. 2 months later, it was signed off as the new approach.
Wow.
Yeah. Now that individual has gone on and on and on. He's extraordinary. So risk, he's always saved me a vast amount of money. Now, now that should motivate business in and of itself. But it's about, so you've got to take risk, and you've got to give opportunity, and you've got to have light touch. Not, I'll see you at the at the water cooler at 10:30, be there or you're done. So we need to understand what we're really talking about. So it needs to be priced in, and it needs to be designed in. Now, the other flip side of this that I've observed is that my organisation is really embracing colleague bottom-up development and opportunity and internal cross-career pathways. This is really, really exciting for them. So they want to stay. There's another way of getting youth engaged with business. But I also suffer from a huge amount of external poaching. Why? Because I've got young people and middle careers who are hugely invested in, huge confidence, and you know, I grit my teeth when I get emails from my shadow board youngsters saying, Chris, just want to let you know, I've got a promotion and a brilliant new opportunity. I could never have got it without the exchanges with you. And I have to write back saying, I'm delighted for you. But I am delighted for them. Now, what should happen is that government needs to incentivize organizations that are willing to invest in their people for their futures and their careers and the value they can bring to the nation. And at the moment, government does not. So other organizations that don't want to invest, all they'll do is they go down the poaching route, and those that spend the money get effectively robbed of talent. So we need to incentivize good business behavior to develop people through career and through life. And if everybody did it, then everybody moves forward. So to your question, how important is it? Internship coaching, massive, absolutely massive.
Thank you so much. Let's go into the room now. Who had a question? Did you still have a question? Yes. I'm going to get the mic to you now.
Do the panel have any advice on how you manage the two gaps? So you have experienced people with knowledge that need to teach and mentor the young people, because we all had that, but they want to work at home because they're much more productive at home because they don't get interrupted so much by the young people who need to ask them questions. And then you've got the young people who, in our experience, are quite happy coming in, but do also have that need for hybrid working.
Yeah.
How do you manage all of that?
Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. I think that is a great question. And the reality is it's a tension, and it's a permanent tension. And some of the things that I've already sort of talked about, some of the examples I've given, is an example of that tension from these, I'll see you if you send me in, I'll see you if you don't, to being able to take risk and have your own leadership team communicate that and demonstrate that same behavior so that you create a safe environment for people to exchange. But the other challenge is, I've got contracts that are 100% in-person, in place. I've got some that are 100% remote, because that's what the commissioners want. So you're always going to have grey areas, points points where they touch, and people look across the boundaries enviously, and you have to manage that. I think the key thing is to be alive to it, and to be willing to invest in it and see it as an opportunity, not a cost. It is a risk, but not a cost, and that means you have to invest in it. And that's the trick, really, is how do you create the resource and the time and the space for organizations to invest in this space? And I think as a nation, our mindset has to be that we need to develop talent through career, through life, not just for the company. It has to be, if you like, for the individual first, because empowerment through progression is amazing. So we offer vast amounts of online learning, additional learning. We connect with external organizations. We create the time for them to go and do it. And it's not directly work related. It's what they want to pursue. And it's a bit like, I'm not stealing it entirely, it's a bit like Richard Branson. Is that his quote of, I think he quote, I paraphrase, invest in them so much that they can leave. And the very act of doing so means that they don't leave. No, it doesn't always work. There's a bell curve. And you have to, and again, this is the leadership risk. You've got to accept that there's a bell curve. Some you're going to lose badly. Some of them you're going to completely be surprised by the brilliance. But overall, it's that sense of, do your people feel that they're invested in? So one of the things we're doing, for example, because of this massive hybrid working and differentiated working across the group, we're having a Shaw Trust Connect Day, where 10% of the workforce is being brought together in one place to do nothing but connect. And they've designed it. My people have designed it. It's not been dictated top down. What is it that you want to connect? What do you want to show? And effectively, what they've created, what I've seen, they've created a kind of internal show and tell, a job fair, an expression of pride in what they do to share across the organisation. And the day is theirs. But that's our investment back to create touch points. But you're going to, so the idea is win most of it and don't try and win all of it, and accept that you're going to lose some.
Can I just add also, I think this is where I think mentoring, coaching is really key. And eventually, and I've also reverse mentoring, so get the younger people to mentor the older, more experienced team members, because actually you learn both ways. And I think it's really important. I mentor remotely, so you can mentor younger people remotely. You can add value through a remote basis. But actually, I learn a lot more from those younger individuals who are telling me, actually, Vera, you're old school. That's like 1960s, mate. You need to be doing this differently. So I think being able to get your teams to be able to immerse themselves in that, hopefully will help in building a formal framework to do it, and build those ambassadors, build those coaches, build those mentors, because I think that will help build the bridge, I think, in my opinion. So it's worked for us.
Thank you. I'm going to come here for a question now.
Ben, you were saying earlier, weren't you, that some young people are looking for flexibility, which is fantastic. If you work at IBM and you work at the Shaw Trust, but of course some occupations, so I've been working a teacher apprenticeship, been developing for a while, they can't offer that flexibility. So do you think there's going to be some occupations are going to suffer a little bit in this new hybrid world, aren't they? So some people are going to want to work at your IBMs and these areas where you can get that flexibility and that hybrid working, because there are going to be those sectors where you just can't get that. And how do we overcome that? Or is that just a challenge that we're just going to have to face? And is it going to have to be some new, completely radical thinking? Do we need to really change the way we think about things?
Any thoughts on that?
I think there's a wider view of looking at that. So it's not kind of a binary answer as, oh, I'm so motivated by this job because it's hybrid, or I'm not. I think when we talk to children about careers, we ask them what it is they love doing and what gives them fulfillment, or what that feedback loop is connected. And so if hybrid working is part of that, it might steer them in that direction. The teaching profession doesn't really lend itself to hybrid working, but I know that it has changed as well. So from the perspective of being able to do more meetings online, perhaps there's a movement towards that as well. So I do think we probably do need to look at how the whole world is moving towards this way, and that doesn't mean that profession shouldn't either. And so I'm all up for that tearing up of the book and redesigning and looking at it from a different way.
And just on that, I think that question is a great question, but I think if we just took a greater historical lens, the same question was asked when we moved from the agricultural economy to the industrial economy, and then we did the deindustrialized economy. And if a society, evolves as the world evolves, you're always going to have this question. And I think there is no cookie cutter. So this generation's leadership is responsible for the forward look. That's the key thing. I remember reading a while ago an article that's saying that when the first telegraph poles were put in the United States, many communities saw it as a threat to society and were busy cutting down the telegraph pole lines. Now, today that's laughable, but at the time it was really serious. So these existential threats and how are we going to move forward have always been overcome, and I think it's our challenge to overcome it today.
Yeah, I think there was a report that just came out, I think it was from Handshake possibly, that said about 50% of young talent at the moment would let a lack of hybrid working would stop them from applying for a certain job.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of 50-50. So I think we've got to, again, I don't know the answer to this, but you've got to hope that that passion, the values, that career path drives them more than the flexibility option, I suppose. But it's going to depend on the individual to some extent, isn't it?
And just finally on that point, I think also we shouldn't underestimate how savvy these young people are. If they want a career in education or want to be in medicine, they probably understand actually they're going to have to go to school, they're going to go to hospital. So I think those individual young people, they have a view, and sometimes if they have that focus, they'll get with it. So I think it's just managing that perspective, I guess.
Thank you all. Okay, part 2 done. So we're going to go for a lunch break. We'll be back at 1:45 to hear insights into what Gen Z value and how employers might think about growing their own talent. Until then, I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us now, and thank you as well. Thank you.
Grew up on the island, and then I went on to working at Red Funnel, a ferry company, but I always wanted to work for the NHS. But there weren't many opportunities for studying on the island with it, unless you wanted to move off and go to university, and I knew that wasn't really for me, so I always waited for the opportunity to do it. Doing my learning through the Open University as an apprenticeship was good because it's very hands-on learning, and we never had to really travel away. We could always work the shifts we needed to type thing and then study after, so it was a good way of learning. There'd be lots of support, and the tutors were always great.
Rachel was somebody that hadn't had any formal caring experience, had cared for a family member with dementia prior to starting the programme. She's gone from a shrinking violet into a huge blooming flower, so it's lovely to have seen how much she's grown, not just as a professional, but as a person as well.
I'm currently in the community. I work with Western Central Community Nurses, and I love it out there. I did a lot of my placements in the hospital on different wards, and I'm very grateful for getting the experience to work on end-of-life ward. It really shaped the person I am now.